Okay, so here's where we open this week. A confidential intelligence report confirmed by the Washington Post says China is gaining a major edge over the U.S. right now. Military, economic, diplomatic, informational. All four simultaneously.
All four at once. So get this, that report was produced for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, and it landed while Trump was literally flying to Beijing for his summit with Xi.
Timing, right?
Yeah, not great.
So today on The Common Thread, I'm Max.
And I'm Blake. We're breaking down the full picture on what that intelligence assessment actually says and why the Pentagon is alarmed.
Plus, CSIS ran the missile math. According to their analysis, the Iran war burned through at least 45% of U.S. precision strike missiles, half the THAAD interceptors, nearly half the Patriot stockpile.
In 7 weeks.
In 7 weeks. CSIS analyst Mark Cancian called it a window of increased vulnerability in the Western Pacific. That's not our framing, that's his.
And that vulnerability has a physical address. China now has 27 permanent outposts and roughly 10,000 troops in the South China Sea, according to 1945. Antelope Reef went from sandbar to a 1,500-acre installation, while the carrier was busy elsewhere. Exactly. And then there's the Philippines angle. Beijing's offering joint energy development deals that the East Asia Forum says would legally legitimize territorial claims Manila already won in a 2016 tribunal.
A trap dressed up as a partnership. We will get into that.
Plus, we close with something concrete, actual calls to make, actual votes to watch.
All right, let's get into it. First up, the intelligence report itself. Here's a question nobody on cable is asking. What if the Iran war is the most important China story of the decade and we've been covering it as a Middle East story? That's the thread, and the Washington Post just pulled it into the open. There's a classified Pentagon assessment produced by the Joint Staff's Intelligence Directorate for Joint Chiefs Chairman General Kane, and 2 officials who read it. The conclusion is flat-out unambiguous. China is exploiting this war to maximize its advantage over the United States. Across how many fronts? Counting 4. They use the Pentagon's DIME framework: diplomatic, informational, military, economic. All 4 showing movement in China's favor.
Okay, so get this, because the timing here is not a footnote. That report was circulating the same week Trump flew to Beijing to meet Xi, a summit that was postponed in March because of the Iran war.
Right. Air Force One touches down in Beijing, and this thing is already making the rounds inside the Pentagon.
Nothing awkward about that at all.
Zero awkwardness.
So what does the report actually say? Because calling it unambiguous is strong language for an intelligence document.
It is. Jacob Stokes at the Center for a New American Security summed up the net effect. By balance, the Iran war is massively improving China's geopolitical position. That's not speculation. That's someone who read the sourcing.
Now, to be fair, Pentagon and White House officials pushed back. They called the report's broader findings fundamentally false.
They did, but the report exists. 2 officials confirmed what's in it, and that pushback lands pretty hollow when you start looking at what's actually happening on the ground.
Which is the part they really don't want read out loud.
Exactly, because the DIME framework is just the map. The military piece of it specifically is where things get concrete and a little alarming. So here's the thing to hold on to as we go deeper. If our weapons stocks and Pacific presence are already stretched thin, who exactly fills that vacuum?
And what does it cost to get it back?
On the military side, here's where it gets concrete. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group left the South China Sea for the Middle East in January. According to USNI News, that left the USS George Washington as basically the only U.S. carrier in the Pacific, and it was in dry dock in Yokosuka.
So the most powerful symbol of U.S. presence in that region just left?
Pulled, and reconnaissance flights over the South China Sea dropped around 30% in February, according to data from the South China Morning Post. Empty skies.
Okay, but let me push on this. Does moving one carrier really change China's calculus? Like, they weren't going to invade Taiwan that Tuesday anyway.
That Tuesday, sure. But here's the thing. The carrier is almost secondary. The munitions story's scarier.
Seriously, walk me through it.
CSIS ran the numbers. By the end of the Iran war's first weeks, the U.S. had burned through at least 45% of its precision strike missiles, roughly half of its THAAD interceptors, and nearly half of its Patriot air defense missiles. Those are the exact systems you need in the Pacific.
Wait. Half the THAAD inventory? Those are the things protecting South Korea.
And they were pulled from South Korea to support Middle East operations. Think about it like a household budget. You've got one savings account, one emergency fund. You spent half of it on one crisis, and now two other potential crises are looking at a half-empty account.
And you can't just refill it overnight.
That's exactly CSIS's point. Mark Cancian put it plainly. The high munitions expenditures have created a window of increased vulnerability in the Western Pacific. His estimate is 1 to 4 years just to get back to pre-war levels, and then additional years after that to reach where you'd want to be for a potential Pacific conflict.
So Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, they're sitting there doing the same math we just did.
The Washington Post's intelligence report specifically names those three countries as worried about whether the U.S. can actually respond if China moves, and China's doing its own math.
Right, so the question becomes, what are they doing with that space? Because if satellite imagery and troop numbers are any indication.
That's exactly where we're going, because what Beijing is building while the U.S. is stretched thin is something you can literally see from orbit. So get this. While we've been watching missiles burn through our stockpiles in the Gulf, China's dredging fleet never stopped working. Antelope Reef in the Paracel Islands. Look it up on satellite. I mean, what are we talking? A pier? Some radar equipment?
Try 1,500 acres of reclaimed land. CSIS's Asia Maritime Intelligence Initiative says that's roughly the size of Mischief Reef, China's previous largest outpost in the whole South China Sea. And Antelope was basically a sandbar 2 years ago.
Wait, so they turned a sandbar into what is essentially a military campus?
With a runway capable of supporting fighter aircraft. The dredging started October 2025. By March 2026, it already rivals their biggest existing base. That's not construction, Max. That's a sprint. And here's the thing. This isn't improvised. This is the long game made visible. While Washington debates the next news cycle, Beijing's playing a 20-year board. Right. And zoom out from Antelope for a second. According to 1945, China currently runs 27 outposts across the South China Sea, with somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 troops permanently stationed there. Permanent. Not rotating through. Permanent. The big three, Fiery Cross, Subi, Mischief, those bases support over 70 fighter aircraft and extend Chinese air reach 800-plus miles from the mainland. That's not a defensive posture. That's a power projection network. You can basically fence off the South China Sea from those positions. Exactly. And here's where it connects to what FDD reported in April. China also erected a floating barrier at Scarborough Shoal, cutting off Filipino fishermen from their own waters. Same window, different tactic, same strategy. So it's not one move. It's coordinated pressure across multiple fronts simultaneously. And on top of that, China's selling weapons to Gulf states trying to defend against Iranian drone strikes while supplying energy to countries cut off by Hormuz disruptions. Arms dealer and energy supplier at the same time to both sides of the same conflict. So they're not a neutral party, they're the beneficiary. That's the word, the beneficiary. And now flip this. China comes to countries like the Philippines and says, hey, let's develop South China Sea resources together. Sounds reasonable, right? Sounds cooperative, almost generous. Until you read the terms. East Asia Forum flagged this in May. That offer has a catch buried in every version of it going back decades. And that's exactly where we're headed next. So here's the move China just pulled. The Philippines is running low on fuel after Hormuz shuts down, and Beijing shows up with what looks like a lifeline, joint oil development in the South China Sea.
An offer Deng Xiaoping first floated in the late 1970s, by the way. Same offer, new energy crisis.
Same terms, too, and that's the tell. According to East Asia Forum, accepting these deals on Beijing's terms effectively converts areas where there's no legal dispute into contested territory. That's the whole point.
Okay, so walk me through the deal structure. What's China actually asking for?
Beijing's framing is set aside sovereignty, cooperate on resources. Sounds reasonable, but the moment Manila sits down at that table, it's implicitly acknowledging a dispute exists in water that a 2016 international tribunal already ruled belongs to the Philippines.
So you're not just signing an energy contract, you're rewriting the legal baseline.
Exactly. Retired Philippine Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio called it outright a trap.
And then, get this, the Guangzhou talks wrapped up March 28th. Philippines and China, 2 days of initial exchanges on oil and gas cooperation. Sounded cordial.
Deadpan. And the day after those talks ended, China ramped up patrols around Scarborough Shoal.
The day after.
East Asia Forum flagged it directly. Diplomacy in the meeting room, pressure on the water. Same week as the Xi-Trump summit in Beijing.
Which is also the week Trump floated the $14 billion Taiwan arms sale as a possible negotiating chip with Beijing.
According to Al Jazeera, Acting Navy Secretary Hung Ka confirmed the pause to a Senate committee Thursday, said it's to preserve munitions for the Iran conflict, officially.
So Taiwan's defense gets deprioritized right as Xi's pressing hardest on the Taiwan question at that same summit.
3 things moving at once: Guangzhou talks, Scarborough patrols, Taiwan arms pause, and Beijing didn't fire a single shot to arrange any of it.
That's not improvisation. That's choreography.
It's a coordinated play, diplomatic offer, military pressure, and U.S. distraction all pulling in the same direction.
And the energy shock is doing half the work for them.
Which is the piece that ties everything together, not just here in the sea, but across the whole board. That's the thread we need to pull on. So here's the thread that ties everything together. Iraq 2003 gave China 9 years of Pacific quiet. Afghanistan gave it 2 decades. And now the Iran war is the 3rd version of the same playbook.
And this time, and this is what gets me, U.S. intelligence is documenting it in real time. The Washington Post report is a classified assessment confirming gains across all 4 dime dimensions simultaneously: diplomatic, informational, military, economic. 0 soldiers committed.
0 soldiers. That is a definition of strategic success most countries can't even imagine.
Right. And here's the piece that should have been the headline everywhere. Washington's whole theory of leverage was the Strait of Hormuz, the logic being China needs that strait open as much as we do, so Beijing won't push too hard.
That theory did not survive contact with reality.
Not even a little. According to Axios, China entered this war with roughly 1.4 billion barrels of strategic oil reserves, about 220 days' worth of Middle East imports, just sitting there.
220 days?
Yeah, and on top of that, Axios reported China controls over 70% of global solar, wind, battery, and EV supply chains. The energy shock we expected to hurt them is actually accelerating the sale of Chinese renewables to oil-starved countries.
So the card Washington thought it was holding
wasn't in the deck.
Wasn't even in the deck.
Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran. Same pattern, sharper execution each time. And now we have the classified receipts.
And that's the thing about patterns. Once you see them laid out like this, Iraq to Afghanistan to Iran, you start asking whether anybody in Washington is noticing the loop.
The report suggests at least someone did.
Small comfort. So what can a regular person actually do with all of this? Because I don't want to leave people just sitting with the weight of it.
That's exactly where we land next. And honestly, the answer is more concrete than you might expect. There's a very specific question you can ask your representative right now, and there's an $80 to $100 billion vote in Congress that gives you a real moment to weigh in.
A specific question, not a petition, not a march, a phone call with 1 sentence.
1 sentence, and it matters more than most people realize.
So here's where all of this lands for you, the person listening right now. There's a concrete move you can make this week.
And I want to stress, you do not need a security clearance or policy degree to do this.
None. Here's the ask. Call or email your representative's office. One question. Does the House Armed Services Committee have a timeline for the defense industrial base production acceleration that Trump announced, and when will THAAD and Patriot inventory numbers be made public?
That's it. One question. You don't have to know what THAAD stands for. You just have to ask when the numbers go public.
Exactly. And if your rep staffer fumbles it, that tells you something too.
Right.
Now, for the second ask, this one goes to your senator. The Pentagon spent $25 billion in the first 60 days of the Iran war, according to Defense One. PBS reported lawmakers have been expecting a supplemental war funding request running close to $100 billion.
And that money has not been formally requested yet. So the window to shape it is right now.
Exactly. Call your senator, ask how they plan to vote, and what conditions they're putting on that money. Specifically, what goes to Pacific readiness versus Middle East operations.
Here's why that question matters beyond geopolitics. The decisions that determine whether deterrents hold in the Pacific for the next decade get made inside appropriations subcommittees most people have never heard of.
Nobody's watching that room.
Nobody. And that's where the trade-offs live. You call, they log it. Enough calls, and the staffers brief the members differently.
So here's the bottom line. We've spent this episode walking through intelligence reports, satellite imagery, diplomatic traps. All of it points the same direction.
China is playing a long game, and long games get decided in the years when nobody's paying attention.
So pay attention, make the call, ask the question. That's the move.
That's the whole show right there.
We'll take it. Okay, so that's the episode, and honestly, Blake, the reframe you opened with is the one that's going to stick with me.
The idea that we've been covering the Iran war as a Middle East story when it's been a China story the whole time.
All four dime dimensions moving in Beijing's favor simultaneously, while the intelligence report is landing on desks as Trump flies to a summit. That's not coincidence.
And the savings account analogy tells you why it matters to regular people.
Yeah.
Half the emergency fund is gone, and 2 other situations are watching.
This is the third time in 20 years an American conflict has handed China a strategic opening. Third!
Yeah, that number should land.
Well, if this helped you see the week differently, share it with one person who needs it. Subscribe so you don't miss Saturday, and make those calls. Your rep on munitions transparency, your senator on Pacific readiness funding.
Your town needs you in the room. Thanks for being here with us.
We'll see you next week.